let's do this. How are you guys? Welcome to Museum of Graffiti Artists Live Talk. Very quickly, Lek, can you introduce yourself?
Vas-y.
So we know who's who.
Hello, my name is Lek.
Salut. Hi, my name is Lek.
And I'm Sowat.
Okay, and Sowat. Okay, there we go. So we know who's who. So thank you for joining us from Paris. And what I'd like to do to introduce you guys to our audience, I want to read a bit of your biography as we get started. Lek and Sowat have been working as a duo since 2010. They share a common interest for urbex, or urban exploration, the art of exploring the city in search of modern ruins. Expanding the boundaries of traditional graffiti, their in-situ experiments bring together videos, architectural abstractions, illegible calligraphies, installations, and DIY archaeology, creating a form of urban land art. In 2012, they released their first common project, Mausolée, after spending a year clandestinely organizing an underground artist residency inside the abandoned Parisian supermarket. Catching the attention of Palace de Tokyo, they were invited to work inside France's biggest contemporary art center for 2 years. Wow, that's impressive. Lek and Sowat locked themselves inside the building's emergency exits, creating an experimental group show along 50 other graffiti artists, sparking what would later become the Lascaux project. The two artists then started traveling around the world with and without their crew, the Mental Vapors, to paint larger-than-life murals, create ephemeral installations, and put together ambitious shows. In 2014, Direct Traces, a film they shot with modern legend Jacques, excuse my French, Villeglé, forgive me,
No problem.
Villeglé, entered the Pompidou permanent collection, while in 2015, they were the first graffiti writers admitted to Via Medici, France's oldest and most prestigious art residency program. Since then, Lek and Sowat have regularly collaborated with artists from other artistic fields, such as beat poet John Giorno, fashion designers Agnes B., and Jean-Charles de la Casse-Bajac, music producers Pedro Winter and Crazy Baldhead, Indian contemporary artists Hanif Qureshi and Amsim Waqif, or pioneers of the graffiti movement such as Futura and Mo2 and John Wan. Finally, in 2018, the dynamic duo started shifting their focus towards construction and public work projects. After a first experience creating cyclopean frescoes along the L12 freeway in Marseille, Lek and Sowat teamed up with NGE and XPO former to be the first artist ever to paint a tunnel boring machine inside Head-and, you got to forgive me for my English here. Head-and-Connect.
That's German.
Head-and-Connect factories. Since they've pursued this collaboration, creating a series of experimental works along the Parisian 14th subway line's extension construction site. Wow, you guys have been really busy.
Thank you very much.
But let's start from the beginning with Lek, and Lek, you started writing graffiti before Sowat. So what were you seeing? What was informing you about graffiti culture?
All right, so I'm gonna translate for Lek because he's not super fluent in English, but go for it.
Mais après, quand tu commences à faire du graffiti, c'est que déjà tu es dans un environnement où
he's saying to start graffiti when you were in Lek's generation, starting graffiti meant that you were born and raised in a not so good environment, especially in Paris.
Et du coup, quand tu commences à voir justement les murs à la chapelle, bah, ça commence à influencer un peu ton envie et d'aller justement sur quelque chose d'inconnu.
So basically, Lek grew up in the 19th district in Paris, and in that neighborhood there was a mythical dirt lot. I don't know how you guys call that in English, called Stalingrad, which was like a crossroad for European graffiti culture. And Lek literally grew up 100 meters away from that place, and it's a place where Europe's biggest graffiti artist went to paint. And so Lek as a kid would just walk around this neighborhood and see those paintings, and it kind of grew his interest and his curiosity for this culture.
So in Paris, at that time, were you already seeing the Chrome Angels and Bando? And those early...
Yeah.
Oh, oui, complètement. Ben, justement, je commence à prendre des photos, c'est vers 87.
Yeah, he starts taking picture of all of these pieces in 87.
Sans vraiment les connaître, mais
without knowing the guys.
Être complètement être happé par.
Yeah, but he was completely fascinated by that movement. And indeed, the people painting back in those days, or the people you were looking at, were definitely the BBCs. People like Ski, like J1, John 1, of course.
Yes, sure.
Bando in the center of Paris, of course.
Exactement.
And people like Meo. And yeah, countless guys from the...
Was he a wall rider or a train rider as well?
C'était plutôt des mecs qui faisaient des murs.
Non, toi.
Ah, moi?
Ouais.
Parce que moi, j'aimais un peu tout.
Yeah, like a little bit of everything.
Je suis vraiment à essayer d'expérimenter un peu dans tous les domaines. Mais après, c'est vrai que je commence à plus m'intéresser au mur.
Yeah, so when he was very young and he discovered the culture, he tried pretty much everything. But as he grew up, his interest definitely focused toward walls, abandoned places. Yeah.
Non. Pour justement me rapprocher des gens que j'apprécie.
Yeah, and to get closer, at least in style, to the people that he admired, like the BBC crew, for example.
So now he's focused on writing in Paris, and you happen to be focusing on writing in Marseille as a young kid.
Yes.
So what were your references for writing?
So it's funny because
in Marseille.
So the Marseille, the big names in Marseille were the 313 crew. People like Abel, Sik. There was this guy called Mosque and Desist were the kings of my region. And I grew up very back in those days. I think that graffiti was a regional affair. And so you could pretty much, once that graffiti left New York and invaded the world, you could be a kid from Marseille and have early references that would be 100% local. I wasn't that much aware of what was happening in New York. Sorry. I mean, my pioneers were the guys from Marseille. So 313 crew, Abel, Sik, the names I said earlier. And in all the pictures I sent you, there's this huge mural done by La Force Alphabétique, which was a mythical crew from the first generation of French graffiti that came to Marseille, did a mural called C'est Marseillais, and yeah, that kind of blew my mind. It kind of changed my, it kind of changed my whole perspective on what art could be, and really focused my interest.
And you started later in what year? In the 90s,
so,
no?
Yeah, I started Lek started in 88. Lek was 12 years old when he started. He started very young. And I pretty much started when I was 15 or 16, and this was by 1995 in Marseille. So we have like kind of a generation in difference. Yeah, I would say. Yeah.
Let me ask you something. In terms of your exposure to graffiti, was the rest of hip hop connected to that experience for you?
Pour moi, la connexion avec le
Est-ce que pour toi,
like beatboying and DJing and rapping?
En tout cas, à cette époque, oui, puisque en même temps de faire du graffiti, tu vas voir les premiers, je sais pas, j'ai vu les premiers concerts de Assassin, par exemple.
Yeah, for Lek it definitely was. He discovered graffiti, and he would also go to the hip-hop concert. He would go see people like Assassin, which was like France's old school
même tous les
rap
premiers
group.
Concerts de rap qui étaient complètement underground.
Yeah, and he would go to the very first hip-hop showcases in Paris that were 100% underground. So yes, for Lek, it was definitely connected. I think for me, it was a bit less. But at the same, I mean, like hip-hop was kind of this package culture where you would have dancing, you would have writing, you would have all these different disciplines, but it doesn't mean that everybody was doing all four of them. You know what I mean? And so maybe I would listen to hip hop, but I never try to rap or I never try to dance or anything. My friends were not b-boys. It was, I think from the get-go, at least for me, it was graffiti counted more than anything else. And as I traveled, I found out that this whole hip hop and graffiti thing is something that journalists kind of invented in a way. Because when you talk to like the Los Angeles old school, those guys would listen to heavy metal. They would not listen necessarily to hip hop. So I don't think it's as clear cut as what one could think it is. Tu vois ce que je veux dire? Yeah. Is that an answer?
Yeah. No, that can be true for many people.
Okay.
So I have the picture up of Stalingrad. This was kind of the local layup. This is where everybody went and met to paint
Yeah.
for many years.
Yes. Yeah, for
And
sure.
so we were talking about your influences in terms of the writing.
Right.
And it's interesting to me, like particularly on this piece, you know, the social activism and the writing in it, United Artists Against Apartheid. I get, and again, kind of mentioning Sun City in South Africa. So these at this period of time when you were going down there to paint with artists, what was that community like? Was it a competitive community of writers? Was it separate crews?
Oui, c'était complètement compétitif.
Yeah, it was very competitive.
Mais c'était aussi un terrain un peu particulier parce que tu pouvais vraiment, les personnes qui y peignaient, ils avaient un peu l'autorisation de le faire.
Yeah, Stalingrad, he's saying that Stalingrad was a very particular place because not anybody could just enter that spot and paint. There was some sort of a hierarchy, I would say.
Ouais,
Yeah,
exactement.
some sort of a hierarchy. So yeah.
Mais c'est pour ça que ça rendait justement les peintures, elles étaient assez respectées parce qu'elles étaient vraiment faites que par les gens qui avaient déjà trouvé le terrain. Donc c'était H2 qui avait trouvé.
So he's saying that all those frescoes would be kind of respected because the people that were authorized in a way to paint inside that spot, they had earned their dues. Ils avaient mérité le fait de peindre là. And it made all of this even the more precious.
Et comme moi, j'en connaissais.
Was that community in where Stalingrad was that a hood? Was that like a ghetto?
So I wouldn't say a ghetto because there's real ghettos in Paris,
populaire.
But we say popular. It's a very popular neighborhood.
C'était vraiment mixé comme population.
Yeah, it's a mix. It's the neighborhood where you could have extremely poor people and wealthier people, but they used to call this whole area crackland. So that pretty much gives you an idea of what Stalingrad used to be in the 80s. It was kind of a dangerous place.
C'est pour ça que c'était un quartier que j'aimais bien puisque c'était vraiment mixé.
Yeah, and he liked it because it was a real mix.
J'étais pas en majorité et justement c'est ça où tu étais avec les communautés.
Yeah, a lot of immigrants, a lot of people from somewhere else than France, a lot of Jewish people, a lot of people from...
So would Americans come down to paint in Stalingrad?
Est-ce que les Américains ils allaient pas à Stalingrad?
Je pense qu'il a dû en avoir
quelques-uns. Yeah, there must have been. Yeah,
he's
not sure.
Je sais que c'était pas... En tout cas, je sais l'Europe principalement.
Yeah, people from all over Europe, yes, but I don't even think it was common back in those days for American people
tous ceux qui pouvaient connaître soit Jay, soit Ski.
Yeah, or maybe Jay or Ski's friends or Loki's friends. But maybe it wasn't as common back in those days to travel, at least for American artists to travel. Would they go to, I don't know.
C'est là que Chalfant a été.
Hein?
Ouais,
yeah, Chalfant. So Chalfant went there to take some pictures.
C'est là où il a mis un peu la pression. Les Français, ils ont fait les plus belles photos.
Yeah, because Chalfant.
Les plus belles peintures.
Comment il s'appelle le livre déjà?
Art.
Yeah, Chalfant went to Stalingrad to take pictures for Art, and he's saying that really set the bar. That really put some sort of spirit of competition. Everybody knew that Henry was going to go to Stalingrad to take pictures, and so everybody started doing really serious stuff.
What impact did subway art and style wars have on France?
Énorme sur la France. Humongous.
Non,
we always say it's the Bible. These two made c'est la Bible.
Ouais, c'est la Bible.
They made a Bible and they evangelized the whole world with those two books. So yeah, it was humongous.
Je pense qu'on mangeait ces livres.
Yeah, Lek says that his generation would eat those books. They would eat them. They would drink them, pray them, study them, copy them, Xerox them, everything them. I was.
So who were the first? Who were the first Americans you met?
C'est quoi les premiers Américains que tu as rencontrés?
Des héros. Ah, en tout cas, influencés ou...
No, meet personally or influence?
That you met personally?
Non, que tu as rencontré personnellement. That's a good question.
Ouais. Moi, je me suis plus intéressé à l'Europe.
Yeah, Lek, with his fantastic level in English that you can hear right now, was maybe more interested in what was happening in Europe. So
Parce que mes premiers pays que j'ai vraiment visités,
Yeah,
c'était plutôt le Danemark,
the first
la
countries where
Hollande.
he went and met writers were more like Denmark, Holland, much closer than America.
Exactement, Allemagne.
America is far away from France. It's a long trip.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Another project you said was a big influence on you guys was this mural.
Yeah, that's what I was telling you. This mural was
and-
painting in Marseille, and it was done by this group called La Force Alphabétique. Membo was part of them, Spirit. Do you know who else?
Ouais, après, peut-être.
We're going to forget names. I hope we're not going to brush anybody right now. But anyways, those guys came in this neighborhood of Marseille called Le Panier, which is another very popular neighborhood in Marseille. It's like a patrimonial neighborhood. It's like beautiful and old. It looks a little bit like Italy. And suddenly you have this, right? Suddenly you have this explosion of color. The south of France is, all the walls are oranges, and there's like a very particular atmosphere. And suddenly you have this burst of color, and it just, this piece right there blew my mind. And when Mambo posted it a few months ago, that's how I got the picture. Because I had a hard time finding pictures of my influences for to send to you, because a lot of this stuff has gone and has disappeared. But he posted it a few weeks ago, and it still blows my mind. The technique that those guys had back in the day was, this is very, very modern. This could have been painted last week. You don't think it's 30 years old, at least not in my eyes. C'est vrai, on pourrait croire que ça a été fait là.
Ah ouais, non, c'est clair.
Yeah.
Non, c'était frais.
And so what you mentioned to me that you spent time in Los Angeles.
Yes.
You've been back and forth from Los Angeles, and we were talking about some of those influences. Tell me about that time that you've been in Los Angeles and Belmont and all the writers you met back then.
So half of my family lives in California. My dad was from LA, so I would spend all my summers traveling to California. And as I grew old, I mean, I discovered graffiti in Marseille, but once I was aware of it, I started really paying attention to what I would see in California. And I was lucky enough to meet Skill. So Skill is the artist that painted that piece on the top left of the images. Who's a member of the UTI crew, one of the biggest crew in Los Angeles. And Skill kind of initiated me to those Angelinos block letters, and the fact that those guys in Los Angeles, they just don't do graffiti like in the rest of the world. Like the rest of the world was pretty much copying New York. At least that's what I felt about Paris. Whereas Los Angeles invented something very different, doing tags where the letters don't touch, spreading out things, and of course Chaz. And Chaz was the biggest influence I've ever had in my career. I was lucky enough to meet him when I was 20 years old. And this piece that you're showing right now, I mean, to this day, there's nothing beats this. I think this is as beautiful as Sumerian plates. This is so primitive and at the same time so modern. I mean, this is my top influence right there.
I would agree, and we see how that plays out in your work. Now we're going to show some of the collaborations you guys have done over the years. Perhaps you could narrate and tell me more about this particular installation, which was in an abandoned supermarket, and we'll play a video as you describe it to us.
Sure. So we showed you our influences and the early pieces we did, but Lek and guys from his generation started inventing what would become urbex, so urban exploration. The idea of leaving a public space to find abandoned places and to work inside of them. And this is something very strange for graffiti, because the idea of graffiti is to write your name in the public space for the most people to see it. Suddenly some guys decided to leave the streets to go paint in places where no one would ever see their pieces, and basically just to bring pictures of it, and the documentation kind of becomes the art, right? And as they went to those abandoned places, it started changing their aesthetics, because it's so complicated to enter some of those spaces that you cannot take a lot of paint with you. And Lek and others, but especially Lek, started injecting architectural principles in their painting, reducing the color palette, and just using a very, just a limited amount of colors. and seeing the wall not as a rectangle anymore, but as a whole space. So we can decide to paint the walls, the floor, the ceiling, everything. Everything can become the art.
Tout ce qui pouvait donner de...
Right, and
Yeah.
the production of it, the photography is just as important, right? The stop motion photography and directing becomes...
Exactly, but I think in this sense, we talked quickly about Henry and Martha earlier. Graffiti and photography have always walked hand in hand, right? Photography has always been a huge part of this culture. I mean, without photography, I don't think graffiti would have traveled so far away from America. But anyways, we started, like in his generation, some of them at least started painting in abandoned places. And this is something that influenced me. And I was lucky enough to meet Lek when I was 32 years old. And he tells me, I meet him. I mean, I'm very impressed by the guy. I'm super happy to meet him. He's my hero. And he's like, oh, dude, I just found this crazy space. It's an abandoned supermarket, 40,000 square meters. What we call virgin walls. I don't know if you guys call this in America virgin walls, but that's how, those are walls that we talk where no one has painted on top of them yet. So the whole spot was virgin. No one has gone inside to paint it. And we started painting just the two of us initially, and it was inside of Paris, but at the same time it was so complicated to access that we had the feeling that we could do a real project inside. And to make a long story short, we ended up spending a whole year inside that space. We invited 40 graffiti artists to come and paint with us, people that are more in the abstract branch of graffiti, people like Loutsider, people like Jay came to paint with us in there. People like O'Clock, like really experimental writers, right? And we started doing 2, 4, 6, 8-hand composition, 10-hand composition, where if you don't know the artist, you could think that it's just one person, just like this piece right now. You could think only one person painted it. But seeing graffiti as jazz, right? Somebody brings the rhythm, somebody brings percussion, somebody brings this instrument, and we mix and we just see what happens. And we made a movie out of it. This is what you're watching right now. You can find it on the internet. It's called Mausolée by LEK SOWAT. We were lucky enough to have Philip Glass give us some music for the movie. We made a book out of it. And finally, we made an experimental show about this whole experience that we put together with those 40 French graffiti artists. And that's the first thing we did together with Lek. Voilà.
It's fascinating that you guys are branching away from traditional graffiti into a lot of very modern themes. And I'm wondering, were you guys art school students, or was it something you learned about along the way?
No, the two of us
Did
are
you study
self-taught.
architecture?
No, so Lek went to architecture
Mais
school.
c'est venu plus tard. Justement, c'est le graffiti qui m'a poussé justement à étudier ce genre de...
Yeah, graffiti kind of pushed him towards architecture. He had a teacher that really believed in him and liked his work, his artist work, and that pushed him. You know, like sometimes there's a teacher in your life that kind of triggers something that you would not have thought about. So this teacher pushed him towards architect school. And I went to a political science school, but the both of us did not do art schools. So I think we experimented art a little bit different from other people. Yeah. So we have an academic background, but not in art.
Right, but yeah, and it seems to me, again, you know, part of this kind of bridging the streets to more experimental and, dare I say, intellectual art, right? More thought-provoking art. You guys thrive in that space where it's just not abstraction. And this particular project that you did has an interesting connection to art history and to Andy Warhol.
Yeah.
Tell us about this project and where did you produce it?
So this is the first thing we did at the Palais Tokyo. We finished the Mausolée, and we were lucky because it had a mediatic resonance in France. We had a bunch of articles. That's what I'm trying to say. We had like media interest. And we kept on telling to everybody that it was a disgrace that we had to paint in those abandoned places, and that the artists that we had invited were fantastic artists, and that everybody should be working in France's top art centers, and that this movement needed to be recognized more, and that we wanted to work in art center, and we wanted to work at the Palais de Tokyo. And we kind of repeated this to every journalist that we would meet, right? And we were lucky because we were heard. We were invited by Jean Loisy, who was director of the Palais de Tokyo back then. We were introduced to him by a curator called Hugo Vitrani, with whom we started working. And the first project that they offered to us was to work with John Giorno. And being self-taught, we had no idea who John Giorno was, right? And we go to this first meeting at the Palais de Tokyo, and we're self-taught artists, and we're like all trembling, and we're a little bit impressed. And we listen to the brief, and they tell us, okay, guys, so you're going to do something cool. You're going to paint a wall, and then there's going to be huge letters painted on top of your wall. And we're kind of dumbfounded. We're like, are you fucking serious? We work our ass off to have an art center tell us that we're going to go get toyed inside the art center. But that just showed how ignorant we were. And because we went back home, we looked who John Giorno was, and he's this amazing artist. So for those who don't know, John Giorno is a poet. In the famous movie where Andy Warhol filmed someone sleeping for 8 hours, John Giorno is the man sleeping for 8 hours. And he did poetry, slam, a lot of amazing projects. And so basically they were offering us to collaborate with him. What you see written on the wall, "A hurricane in a drop of calm," is the name of one of his poems that he slammed the night of the opening in front of the wall. And yeah, we were lucky enough to paint those two walls with him. I'm saying with him because he would come and see us every day. And he was very accepting to us. It didn't matter to him that we came from graffiti. He really liked this culture already. And we had a beautiful dialogue with Giorno. And this is the first thing we did inside the art institution. Yeah.
So now that you're doing your works at this point in art institutions, you are kind of balancing your creative life between three places: the streets,
yeah,
the studio, and succeeding in the commercial art market.
Yeah.
When you finally get to this place, these prestigious institutions, do you feel a sense of achievement from that, or is it about time, or is it infiltration? What does that feel like for you?
Non, il dit à partir du moment où vous commencez à aller travailler dans ces institutions, comment est-ce que vous ressentez ça? Est-ce que c'est un achievement, c'est une réussite, ou est-ce que c'est un challenge ou
Moi, je pense que c'est un challenge.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
Parce que on sait très bien que c'est un milieu qui connaît pas cette culture et qu'on avait tout à prouver justement.
Yeah, he's saying that it's at least when we start going to the Palais Tokyo, it's maybe it's a art world that doesn't necessarily know what graffiti is and what the culture of graffiti can be, and maybe they just have this image in their head. They just have a cliche, you know. And so we felt that we needed to prove a lot of things. We had a lot of things to prove to ourselves, but we had a lot of things to prove to the art world. We wanted to compete. We the same competition that Lek would tell you about in Stalingrad. I think we felt the exact same thing in the art institution. So it wasn't an achievement. It was the beginning of a new race. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. It's one of those things when we start thinking about our relationship between the streets, but also our relationship with institutions that generally look at us as outsiders. They forget how inside we are in a culture that they are not a part of.
Yes.
Right. And then all of a sudden they ask you, well, come deep inside. And you guys go really, really deep inside. You do this project.
We tried.
Yeah, and you completely infiltrate. Tell us about this project and the scale of this project in Palais de Tokyo.
Basically, so we had this first gig with John Giorno, and what they were telling us is that if this goes okay, because they don't know us and we have no credentials. I mean, We haven't done an art school, so there's nothing reassuring about our resume. Do you know what I mean? There's nothing that they can judge about. They only saw a mausolée. So they were telling us, we're going to give you this opportunity with Giorno. If it goes correctly, we will give you a space. And the space that they offered us is what you're showing right now, is the emergency exits of the building, which was a beautiful choice.
Mais on aurait aussi pu le faire que pour nous. Mais
Yeah,
pour
we
nous
could
deux.
have, yeah, for sure. Which was a beautiful choice because it looked like urbex. It wasn't the usual curatorial space because it was an emergency exit. They had never had exhibitions in there. And so basically they gave us the keys to the space. They told us, do what you want to do. And they had never done a graffiti exhibition at the Palais Tokyo. So we took it upon ourselves to say, okay, so you guys have never done anything about graffiti. We're going to invite the top of the graffiti, of the French graffiti culture. And we're going to do an experimental show together. And we're going to do something where there's 50 artists that are going to paint in the same space. But when you're going to look at the picture, it can look like there's only, just like we had done at Mausolée, like this is a jazz composition. And there's only, you could think that there's only one artist that painted in the whole space, when it was really a lot of different artists. And we brought people that, so the artist we're seeing right now is called Azil. Azil is the biggest train and subway legend in the French graffiti world. It's someone that has almost exclusively painted on the Parisian subway system. If you're interested in graffiti culture in France, Azil is God. And we had people like Azil, who to us, I mean, when we invited him, he was having a trial with the RATP, which is the local MTA. So to us, it was a symbol to bring an artist that was having a current trial with the RATP. And we invited someone else, someone called Dran, who has a very childlike universe. His graffiti looks a bit more like graffiti you would find in the hall of a building, if you know what I'm saying. And we were interested in talking about all the different facets, all the different aspects of this culture, and putting everybody in the same space and see what happens. And this is the part of the show that you could visit, right? There's a door on the left of this picture. I don't think you have the picture of it, but there's a door to the left. And the first day...
So how did people receive it? What was the overall reception by the public?
I think it was good. Seriously, I think it was good. People love graffiti. And I think, I mean...
Et surtout, c'était les débuts, donc
yeah, it was the beginning. It was exciting. There were a lot of big names. There were a lot of people that went to see the show, and that liked it for what it is and the generosity of it. Because when you have 50, I mean, Carlos, you put together shows, you know what it means to bring 50 artists to work in the same space. It's like it's a marathon in a way. And so I think the reaction was good. The reaction got even better when we started revealing the rest of the scope of what we did there. So as I was telling you, there's a door on the left right there. You don't see it on this picture. And the first time we visited the space, I wanted to open the door, and the curator that was having us visit the space said, no, you cannot open this door. And I'm like, why? And it's like, because you don't have the good credentials. It's forbidden to you. You cannot go behind that door. And so that's where our project really began. We decided that the show that the people could visit would be like a Trojan horse. This is our way to infiltrate the institution. And then we started doing art all over the rest of the building, and things that were not, that the public couldn't see, right? Things you couldn't visit. So, yeah, man. Yeah, this is it. This is what you're seeing right now.
Well, part of it, you mentioned that Larry Clark came and filmed there.
Yeah, we were lucky that Larry Clark came 2 years later to shoot scenes of his The Smell of Us movie inside the show. We're just bragging with this picture. We just wanted to show you this cool picture of us with Larry Clark.
Well, one of the things that I'm attracted to about the work that you guys do is that it's both challenging in its theories. It's still grounded in the philosophy of writers, but it's also grounded into the greater narrative of modern art that was born in Paris and Italy and in Russia and Poland. That connection that you guys put this tremendous amount of history into the work is, I think, one of the things I found really impressive, because for me personally, with an interest in that type of work, it shows, it proves that conceptually writers have a broader bandwidth than just the name,
Of course.
right? That the experience of excavating places that you should never go to, like train tunnels, layups, things like that, things that stir up censuses and ideas, and you know, the challenge of where to make art. Where does art live? Where should it live? That's always been a big question for us. And does it have to be, do you have to see it in order for it to exist? And then this part of it, this part of the exhibition, which is great, this is stuff people don't get to see.
No, this is under the Palais Tokyo.
Explain to us this part of the exhibition.
So this is the bigger thing we did. We did 3 movies about this idea of how to vandalize a museum without getting caught and without getting thrown out of it. So the first movie is called Invisible Vandalism. Those are the images that you showed before. The second one is called Direct Traces. I think you're going to show it a bit later. And this one here is called Underground Doesn't Exist Anymore. And this is a space that was built. This is under the Palais Tokyo. This is the technical space. And if ever there's a fire at the Palais Tokyo, this is where the smoke is going to be thrown out from, right? And so we found this space very, very early on. I mean, the first days that we would spend at the Palais Tokyo, Lek and me, we were just walking around with the curator, with Hugo Vitrani, looking at all the hatches, trying to find something under. We wanted to paint something that would survive us inside this institution. And so we find this huge space. And it took us 2 years to, it was in a locked technical room. It took us 2 years to find a routine for the guards to open this door to us every day without questioning what it is that we were doing there. I know this sounds very weird for us to talk about this now, but this is exactly how we did it. We would tell them that we would stock our material for the regular show inside the space. And every day we would go and see them and tell them, can you open the door for me? Can you open the door? Can you close the door for me? Can you open the door for me? Can you close the door for me? And after 2 years, it was like a Pavlov reflex. They would just open that fucking door whenever we would ask. And one day we decided,
how amazing,
we started to work inside that strange space. And in the course of 2 years, we had been wondering what it is that we can do that would be relevant to do inside the space. And one day Lek said, fuck it, we're just going to invite our gods. And so we reached out to Motu, who you have on the picture right here. We sent Motu 10 pictures of this space, and we told him, hey Mode, we have no budget, because we had no budget. We can only pay for your plane ticket. Here's pictures of a space that the public will not be able to see, but it's at the Palais Tokyo. We would love to paint this with you. Would you be interested? And we were lucky because Mode said yes. He graced us with 5 days with us in that very strange space. You cannot see, I mean, those are just pictures, but there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of dust. That's why Mode has a mask on that picture before. And so we spent 5 days. He wrote, he's the one who came up with the sentence. He wrote, underground doesn't exist anymore on the walls. He decided to use that Lascaux kind of color tone that's just super beautiful. And then we completed his sentences by painting the floor and the ceiling. And when we were done with that, we told him we're dreaming of working with Futura. And he reached out to Futura, and Hugo Vitrani invited Futura to do a normal wall in the place where all the public can see the art. And while he was there, we just brought him in that underground space, and he stayed with us for 45 minutes. And it was just the most beautiful 45 minutes of our graffiti careers, to have Futura come in this strange space and to do all the signature moves. This is like, to me, just like a skateboard. It's like a skateboarder doing all the beautiful moves, and he did them for us.
Yeah, this is a classic Futura.
Yeah,
this is pretty amazing, and all the while the directors have no idea.
Yeah, it's all there. It's all there. And then we completed the piece, and we spent maybe 4 months working on the movie about this whole thing. And when we're finished, we were lucky to have Aphex Twin let us use some of his music to do this movie. And yeah, that's when we finished this is when we finished the Palais Tokyo. To us, when we finished this, we had proven that you can do graffiti inside the institution. It's just a question
And
of
so,
spending
at what point did you reveal it to the museum?
Oh, so what we did is the director, we went to see him the day Motu started painting, and we said, okay, we might have fucked up. We started painting in this space, and we invited this guy. Are you okay with it? So the director was aware from the very first day we started painting, but he asked us to keep on working on the low, discreetly for security reason. We didn't know back then that this was we didn't know this was the smoke exit of the building. And so when we finished our part of the project, that's when we revealed it, and that's when they freaked out. Because it turns out that we were taking a very serious health risk. If there had been a fire in the building, Lek and I would be dead. But we don't know it.
Was there any appreciation by them after the fact?
Yeah, of course. No, they loved it. I mean, except for the security guys that were legally responsible for us being in this space. No, I think they loved it. They they embraced it. I think they loved it.
Did anybody of the museum go themselves to? Did they go themselves to take a look at it?
So some of them went, and then a few years later, Hugo Vitrani invited JR and Gemeos to do another security hatch. That's how much they loved it. They redid the idea somewhere else. Another security hatch that you couldn't be that could not be open to the public. No, I think they liked it. But you know, the thing is that we arrived in the institution, and we were in France. We say écorché vif, like when your skin is torn out of your body and everything hurts you. That's a bit like we were all paranoid, and we had been looked down on for so long that we had this image about contemporary art, and we thought that they would think that they're better than us and blah blah, and we had this really distorted image. What happened is that we spent 2 years inside this institution and then in others, and we discovered that they're just as crazy as we are about their artists. It's just a question of culture. I mean, if you hear them talk about their artists, they're going to talk about them just the way I talk to you about Azil, or how you could talk about your old school, and they're just as art lovers as we are. It's just their focus is very different, I would say. So yeah, I mean, anything like this, they can only like and appreciate it. It's pure. I mean, those are pure ideas. So what's to hate? No?
No, again, a completely fascinating approach. And again, one of the things that you've done for them is given them such a gift from graffiti, from the culture. You've given them such a important gift in terms of not just having great artists down there with you in great art, but again, tying history, this unique history to their museum, uniquely to their museum. It gives it a special provenance, right, that no one else can claim. But that will be forever tied to them.
Palais Tokyo is a symbol. I mean, when you're French, all your life, and you're all your life you've heard about the Palais Tokyo, and all your life you heard it's not for you, it's not for you, it's not for you, it's not for you. So when you decide,
right, it's always been reserved for all the classical great artists and the modernists.
But we don't believe into that.
You guys go.
Yeah, we don't believe into that. I think that. So I think Marcel Duchamp is awesome because he invents conceptual art. And then I think you guys come right after. And when you start doing illegal art on trains, the idea is just as powerful as what Duchamp did, right? And so, we don't. I don't think we're outsiders. I think we're in the middle of it. I just think it's taking a long time for people that are outsiders to this movement to understand it. But I think that Duchamp, Gauguin, and Futura are completely connected. It's the same line.
Well, I always say it's better to be the outsider they look into than looking at it from the outside.
Yeah, for sure.
And listen, that said, this is the first hour of our conversation. We have another part 2. So those people who are joining us, hang tight. I'm going to save the video. Stay on. I'm going to come back for the second half. with LEK and SOWAT. This fascinating conversation, guys. I really want to thank you again for sharing these amazing stories, because you know, the conversation has been broadened because of these things, this work that you guys contributed, not just for graffiti per se, but for modern art, from contemporary art, contemporary thinking, on how we think about where our art is placed and what institutions or the streets. Those things are very important to us. You guys, you know, completely bring a whole different angle to this that we've been needing for such a long time. And we're going to discover some more about you in a minute. So I'm gonna sign off and then sign right back on. So stay right where you are. I'll be right back.